that's pretty heavy. What movie is it? Sounds like about 900 of you still need to watch the movie. You've never seen The Count of Monte Cristo? Oh. If you find yourself needing a study break this weekend, watch The Count of Monte Cristo. There is some significant lines in the middle of that that have to do with a little bit of what we're going to study for the next 3 weeks. If you came in a little bit early, we started on the more reflective side, serious side. We didn't want to just jump into vibrant, loud, ton of voices singing. We wanted to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves, right? Be a little bit honest. I use language like this. I said, God, we're an open book to you. You know what we think. You know what we do. You know all those little motivational things, those calculated things that only our minds know, that we think nobody else knows. God knows. And in this video clip, you have a guy that is falsely accused. His girlfriend, fiance, is told that he did all these horrible things. Somebody else moves in on her, sends him off. He's imprisoned and didn't do anything wrong. And next thing you know, he finds himself being beat every year. And the whole movie goes on where he keeps putting all these different days as marks. And there's hundreds and hundreds of days, years that he's there. And there's this one phrase that somebody wrote up there, God will give me justice. And he seems like up front he believes it. And the jailer mocks him for believing it. And you'll see if you watch the movie, there's a whole other plot to the story. Revenge, no revenge. Justice, no justice. But it really brings into focus kind of what's happening in Micah. Some of us don't think justice is possible, like the jailer. What'd he say? God doesn't come to France this time of year. Justice is impossible. But we believe that it is, and we want to talk about it, and we want to take Micah seriously. And we want to take it seriously like it was written originally to that crowd, but we also want to then say, well, what in the world does it mean to us? So for 3 weeks before Ash Wednesday comes up, some of you are part of churches that celebrate Lent, which is preparation for Easter. Ash Wednesday is a time to say, man, I'm going to get ready for really appreciating what it means for Jesus to be crucified on the cross and being raised from the dead. We're going to do a 3-week warm-up until we get to that preparation for Easter time, and we're going to look at Micah 6:8. You can see behind me that we're going to look at justice, we're going to look at mercy, we're going to look at humility, and really ground it in a couple verses, but also at the same time look at the whole swath of Micah. I want to read it out of the Message first, but I got to give a disclaimer. Paraphrased version sometimes puts it in language that helps us understand a little bit. I don't think the Message is strong enough, but I think it's a great warm-up. A little bit from now, I'm going to have one of our newest pastors. I mentioned Pastor Brenda, but one of our other ones that's really new, just got hired this Christmas season. Pastor Janet's going to come up here and share. And Janet and I have about an 8-9 year history where we've known each other in different capacities. She's worked in our office before. She was a student here way back when. But the coolest thing about Janet is her dad makes the best salsa ever. It's not why she was hired. That was like a fringe benefit. But he started mild with me. He got me warmed up, like, tastes sweet, it's good. Got a little bit hotter the next time, a little bit hotter. And now I love it so hot that I just want to cry by the third chip, and my sinuses just absolutely get cleansed and washed out. That's a little bit about, you're like, what does salsa and Micah have to do with each other? I'm about to tell you. I think the Message is a little too soft. It's not direct enough. It's not in our face. But I think it might help warm us up to be ready for what the gist of this is saying, to then be ready for the, I better check myself before I wreck myself. I better be an open book because God may want to do more than I ever imagined. So check out some mild salsa and it'll get hotter. Micah 6:8 from the Message, paraphrased version by Eugene Peterson, says this: but he's already made it plain how to live, what to do, what God is looking for in men and women. It's quite simple. Do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in your love. And don't take yourself too seriously. Take God seriously. It's a great start to Micah 6:8. It's a little bit of a warm-up. It's a medium or mild salsa going, yeah, that sounds good. I think I could live that way. All right, I'm willing to wrestle with that a little bit. But if that's all we did tonight, I feel like we would be misrepresenting the totality, the whole expanse of Micah. And so I need to be a little bit more forthright and give you a bigger picture of it. I want to do that by referencing someone by the name of Walter Brueggemann and a book he wrote. And part of what he does is he focuses in on Micah and really tries to help us understand prophets in general. So not just minor prophets, but major prophets. And he talks about the work that these prophets do. The title of the book is 3 Urgent Prophetic Tasks. And he describes what really prophets were intended for and how they would get the attention of the people and how they wouldn't like it, but then it would stir things up and then they would ignore it and then doom would come. And I think the best way I can describe what the book is about is to give you a simple version of what happens a lot in Micah and then try to describe more what Walter Brueggemann says about it. In Micah, if you were to read it, it is so short. Before you get a ton of homework, I think I read it 3 or 4 times during Christmas break. It's just a couple chapters. You're going to see a theme of doom, kind of like you're wrecking yourself and it's coming, and then hope. Doom and hope. Look at your life. Look where it's headed. Doom and hope. And some of it is set up like a little bit of a lawsuit or a court case, like all the things are stacked against the people of Israel. You don't do this, you do this, you're aggressive in this way that doesn't please the Lord. Now the Assyrians are going to come in and you really got to smell the coffee. Wake up and smell the coffee. That's one way to think about Micah, doom and hope. And the reason I keep saying doom and hope is I don't want you to miss the hope piece, because when you leave tonight, if you're like, oh no, a minor prophet, we're going to get our butts kicked and walk out of here miserable. No, I'm hoping we will get a good dose of reality, and then we'll get hope that things can be different and God wants to do something different in us. Walter Brueggemann doesn't say doom and hope. He starts with the word reality. I think that happens in Micah, and I think that happens in a lot of the prophets, where what is really going on in them is spelled out. There's a bunch of people in Micah who are pretty much land grabbers. And I'm going to use that kind of phrase in a bunch of different ways tonight so that you can kind of think about it, not just in the literal sense, but really in a metaphorical sense as well. They were stealing all the land. They were hoarding it. There were very wealthy people that were ignoring those who weren't eating. There was some that had all the power, and they thought about war, and they thought about how to get more and more land. There was never enough land for a few people, and they wanted more and more. They were land grabbers. And the doom that was talked about in Micah was, man, you got to live differently because you're ignoring 80% of the people. Some of you, 20%. Those were my numbers, not in Micah. It wasn't broken down in percentages, but it's like 20% of you have everything and you ignore the 80%. Doom is coming because this is not what God intended, and it's not how you will be able to continue to live. Walter Brueggemann calls that reality. I don't know about you. Sometimes I don't like reality. I like the clean version, oh, it's not that bad. You're a pretty good guy. You're better than somebody else's husband. You know, I have a tradition in my house, and it's not good, but whenever I get caught being bad, and I know I'm talking about myself like I'm 3 years old, but sometimes I act that way. My wife says that there are 3 children in the house, but there's only 2 that are 16 and 18. I'm the third one. Sometimes when I get totally exposed and like I'm acting like a 5-year-old, which does happen at times, I notice that my first gut reaction is not reality. Yes, you're right. I'm a train wreck. My first reaction is, yeah, but have you seen the neighbor next door, what their husband does, right? I can always name like 10 other people that are like at least 3-4% worse than me. And so I don't like reality. I like dodge and deflect. Anybody else there, or is that just me? I do that with my wife, and I think I do it with God sometimes. Walter Brueggemann says that Micah, doom or reality, is an important part of the prophetic task to get us to wake up. The second piece that Walter Brueggemann talks about is grief. And that is when we are made aware of a reality that we actually would have a sensitivity, a heart, a discernment to go, that is true about me, or that is true about us as a community, and it breaks our hearts. Not in like a debilitating way. I don't know if you guys have ever heard something about yourself and you just start to be like a miserable little puppy and like all of a sudden you're like, oh, nobody likes me, you know. I do that too sometimes. I'm going to be really confessional with you. Like when I get called out or God gets in my dish, and I say that in the most positive, transformational way, that God's like, why did you treat people that way? When God gets in my dish and just says, why you like that? There's some moments I just want to go, why don't you just love me? It's what your job is, you know? Rather than, yeah, God, you're right on, straight out. That's the reality of who I am. And I think grief and brokenness is what's stirring in me. Walter Brueggemann uses that final third word, like I mentioned before, the doom and then the hope. That in the prophetic call, when reality happens, when despair happens, and sometimes when even the Assyrians come in and take over what this people group were living in and their land and being really just wiped out or carried off into other places, that really there is hope after that. There's a God that just doesn't enjoy us having reality, despair, and then train wreck forever, but there's hope that something new can happen. And that's really what we're hoping will kind of happen in this 3-week series and even happen tonight. Let me give you some symbolism before we kind of really look at a couple other things, and I'm going to have Pastor Janet come up and do something in a second. You notice that we have amazing art students, SALT team students. We did an announcement early on saying we love it when students dream with us and help create stuff. This was all created by students, and we'll be needing more new ones next year because many are graduating. And what was decided by that team was one of the ways to display the reality for us would be newspapers. Now, I know none of you read the newspaper anymore, except for the Claws. If you work for the Claws, we all read it. It's awesome. And I don't say it sarcastically. I'm trying to be positive. I really am. But you guys are so stinking digital that I could see you being a little kind of like laughing at this. No, we wanted newspapers to represent reality. If we were to look at these newspapers up here or to think about a stack of newspapers of some kind, you would be able to see storylines that are like a shocking reality, that are a little bit discouraging and a little overwhelming. We intentionally got the LA Times, we intentionally picked up the Claws, and we intentionally grabbed some of the newspapers from Citrus College, so that in this room there's storylines of reality. Maybe despair, maybe hope, but in some ways, these are the things that are happening around us. If you don't read the newspaper, but you see bits of information through BuzzFeed or Twitter or something like that, you can see an unjust world very easily. And as you look at an unjust world, if you're like me, it's really easy to deflect. It's really easy to point at somebody else, and it's really easy to go, it probably has nothing to do with me. That's exactly like the people in Micah. They basically kept replying to the prophet and kept replying to God. That's not us. That's somebody else. Pastor Janet's going to come up and give a little illustration of something that happened in a newspaper once that might help us be able to grasp a little bit more where we're headed tonight. Janet, welcome.
So in our conversations about this passage, just with different people, one of our students brought up just a really interesting story. And so presumably, one of the newspapers presented this question that just said, what is the problem with the world? And so they asked for a lot of submissions, and English writer by the name of G.K. Chesterton submitted a very simple reply that just said, I am. So the question, what is wrong with the world? And his reply, I am. And so while, again, the story isn't confirmed, I think for us it really presents just this right attitude in which to read Micah. I think in a society where we're so easy to, or just so quick to create a list of the people, places, and things that are wrong with the world, this just really puts us and invites us to really to look at ourselves first and really see it from that perspective initially.
Yeah, thanks, Janet. Could you imagine somebody that smart or has the ability to come up like a 12-page editorial of all the things that would be wrong with the world, and presumably, because it hasn't been proven. We tried to find real detailed information about it, and one of the students that's on the SALT team mentioned it to us. But could you imagine if somebody that thoughtful would just write back, I'm the problem? One of the things we wanted to do today to try to really be reflective and be that open book and not be deflective is we kind of thought about what that might look like for each of us. And so a chalk image in a newspaper, we simply wanted to think through in 4 simple pauses. What is wrong with the world? I am. What is wrong with the world? Where is there injustice? Why is it the way it is? It's broken. I'm the problem. What's wrong with the world? I am. What's wrong with the world? I am. Tonight, I know that it would be really easy for any one of us to deflect the I am moment and point to someone down the hall in our dorm, or point to a parent back home, or point to somebody in a certain city that's 4 cities over, or to point to somebody in another country or another spot around the world. But I think the way that Micah and God wants to get my attention, I'm not even going to put this on you, the way God wants to get my attention is for me to say, what's wrong with the world? Well, at moments, it's me. I'm the problem. I'm the problem. And it creates a real, just sweet space for God to go, I can work with you. I can do things in you that really I could have never done if you were ignoring me. The only thing that's going to get your attention when you ignore me is that doom, that destruction, that despair place. But to have a heart that is wide open and saying, all right, God, help me to see where I'm broken. Tonight, with some of those thoughts, what we're hoping is that as you hear this Micah 6:8, you'll think with us. Listen to the NRSV. It goes like this. He has told you, O mortal. Remember I told you the salsa would get a little bit stronger? O mortal, that's like hardcore. He has told you, O mortal, who will not live forever. Wake up and smell the coffee. What is good? And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. The NIV says close to the same thing with a little bit of different wording. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy. Sometimes kindness and mercy are interchanged depending on the Hebrew and how it's translated. And to walk humbly with your God. Tonight, we want you guys to think about justice a little bit. And if you're going to think about justice, and the crowd that I hung out with thinking about this passage talked about justice, you got to think about injustice a little bit. Can I give you a little preview? If you read the chapters in Micah, here's what you'll find in there. In chapter 2, verses 1 to 2, injustice is defined by taking what belongs to others. You know what's so great? You guys aren't in 3rd grade anymore, and you haven't had a play date where a 5-year-old comes over and you guys fight over a play truck or a doll. Or do anybody ever get kicked out of Sunday school for biting someone or pulling hair? I so got kicked out for biting people. It was so great. It's really easy for all of us right now to kind of think about injustice, taking what belongs to others. I haven't done that. That's not me. Why are we talking about this, Woody? I don't take things from people. Have you ever been in a conversation where, and it might be hard to reflect on this and think about this. I'm going to, just the most simplistic example ever. Have you ever been in a conversation with a crowd of people and so focused or in need of owning that conversation when somebody else came up with something that needed validation or encouragement, all of a sudden the conversation was completely robbed and the attention was taken from that moment and put on you? My guess is a lot of us can't think of those moments because it's so hard to have an outer body experience and watch that and see that, but we so know it when everybody else does. I know some of us in here right away went, oh man, that is so Susie. Or that's Kevin, man. Every time he walks in the room, all he talks about is wakeboarding, and now he does a million triple backflips, whatever. And it's so easy to point it out in everybody else, but what we're hoping in this series and what's happening in Micah, that when we take, when we rob, when we steal even if it's things like dignity from one another, that injustice is a part of us. And I know sometimes 18 to 25 years old, when you are here in school, and we have older students as well, when you're here, you are so broke. It's hard to talk about money because you want to talk about injustice. You're saying the injustice is, I don't have 50 grand a year to pay for college and classes and books. Some of you right now are borrowing books from your neighbor or doing everything you can to photocopy books. I mean, when we talk about money, sometimes you can't even imagine that, but you would be surprised how much each of us has than somebody else. And so part of injustice is this taking what belongs to other. Another form of injustice in Micah is treating people inhumanely. Again, I know that word sounds so serious. Inhumanely. No, I've never done that. But I almost thought about being really bold and asking every single person in this room to stand up. I won't do that to you, but maybe mentally do it. Imagine you're standing right now. And I look at all of us and I simply say, if you have gone through this entire week without belittling somebody either out loud or in your mind, please stay standing and everybody else sit down. It'd be an interesting room what would happen in here, wouldn't it? I know there's probably more saints than me, but I can think of a time that I thought of somebody. It was actually a driving moment the other day, and actually, as I thought about it, the reason I was really mad at them is I was driving unfairly and they got in my way of driving unfairly. Therefore, they're driving unfairly. No, I'm being serious. I mean, it's interesting to reflect back on it and put so much of it on somebody else. And I'm talking about a lot of just personal scenarios here. We haven't even got into local injustice or global injustice or some of the significant things that happen. I'm trying to talk about really basic injustices that you and I may just kind of minimize and put off to the side, but these are the things that break God's heart. They really do. I was thinking about it in here when it talks about treating people inhumanely. You would really have to hear from the Lord how to go about it. But what if every single one of us in this room, there's probably 900 some people in this room tonight. What if every single one of us with an open heart said, God, where have I been unjust? Where have I taken something from somebody? Where have I treated somebody inhumanely? And God, when you made me aware of that, would you give me an action, a do moment where I could go make that right, where I could ask for forgiveness, where I could live differently, where I could change my ways. Could you imagine the overall impact that would be lived out with 900 people living justly, even in just a personal relationship? Dear God, please help that be more than a random long shot idea. Help it to be a reality. Another injustice in Micah is this selfishly exploiting relationships. This is so personal. I mean, we're not even talking about how people will move into business and underpay people. And we're not talking about how people will not promote some people and do things and ignore and harm and foul. And I mean, there are significant brokenness still in what many call a free America that happened. But that word relationships, I even thought about this. How many of us in here could look at a relationship with a significant other where somehow, some way, we have actually treated them and exploited them? How many of us have gone through relationships going, well, I got a fun 6 months, I'm on to the next thing? How many of us have intentionally befriended somebody because we gained something? I remember a specific scenario, and now that I think about this and read this and think about the other scenario, I remember a moment being freshman in college and a bunch of guys standing around going, man, we don't have anything to do during Christmas break, but you know that guy down the hall, not many of us know him, he's got a cabin in Mammoth. What if we get to know him and we could go to his cabin in Mammoth? And you laugh and you think it's no big deal, but how often do we do weird, crazy things like that in even small ways or big ways? We don't have transportation, but Billy Bob does. Let's be his friend for a little while so we can actually get somewhere. Exploiting relationships. God absolutely cares about those things, do we? Justice defined. Justice is to sort out what belongs to whom and to return it to them. Justice must include action and movement. Behind me, this justice language that we're thinking about tonight, notice that it doesn't say think about justice. Notice that it doesn't say dialogue about justice. Notice that it doesn't say hope about justice. Notice that it doesn't say somewhere down the road when God finally decides to fix everything, maybe justice will show up. It says so personally, both individually and corporately, do it. Walk out of here, not just your worship, not just your singing, but when you come in contact with a just God who works in ways that's always fair with us, it's always gracious and loving and kindness to us, how does that then flow out of us to others and those that are around us? Came up with a list that some students helped me think through. Here's some of the reasons why maybe you and I don't think about living out or doing justice. Things like this come to our mind. We may never say them out loud, but they do happen. I don't know them. Why should I help out? Not my fault. I didn't do that scenario. What about this one? I helped last time. I don't want to this time. What about this one? I'm not from there. That's not my town. What about I'm one of the good ones. I shouldn't have to deal with this. What about I'm struggling too? I have plenty of my own issues. Why do I have to get involved in somebody else's? What about nobody ever treated me with justice? Why should I have to treat others with justice? I don't know if you're human or normal like me, but it's really easy to say that we like this passage, we like this verse, but to really get to the nitty-gritty of what it means to be an open book and say, God, reveal in me where I am unjust and help me to be someone that does something about it, is really significant. I want to use the word dignity for a few minutes, and maybe the Holy Spirit will work in you what it looks like to be someone that's about the business of justice. To experience God's love that helps us to do things that normally we wouldn't do, like ask somebody to forgive us or to say, I was wrong. How many of you you break out into a cold sweat when you have to tell someone you were wrong? Like some of us are masters at going a lifetime without ever saying I'm wrong. We go, I kind of made a mistake, but because of how you were in the room at that moment, that's why I did that. So it's technically your fault, right? I mean, this injustice business is some serious work. But I want you to see a moment that really moved me the first time I saw it, where dignity was given to somebody. It's a very small child, but you could tell that this person so deeply loves that they want this little one to be valued. In a storyline, if you ever seen the movie before, there is a child that is being watched by someone, taken care of by someone who helps in every way. And there's kind of a mother who is unhappy, broken, really unjust in so many ways, and basically spends the whole movie not really giving a rip about her own child. And in a very broken moment where some things happen, the one who is treated unjustly because she is fired slows down long enough and still lives justice and gives dignity to somebody. I'm curious what it would look like if every single one of us lived like that at moments. Watch this little clip from The Help. That, some of you are like going like this right now. In all seriousness, that movie has deeply inspired me. You have someone who is fired, treated unjustly, and would have every moment in that scene to go, burn this house down. These people are rude, they're wrong, talk bad about them, ruin them, trash them, do everything. But takes a moment, pauses, and looks at somebody else that has been treated unjustly, ignored, a little child, and basically says, you're smart, you're kind, you're important. What if every single one of us were open to God filling us up with that same love, that same grace, and every person we came across, that's how we gave dignity. That's how we valued people. What about that one that's roaming around this campus alone, or the one on your hall, or the one in an apartment that just still hasn't connected? Who has gone out of their way for justice and dignity? Heard a comment the other day about somebody leaving a big mess. It was a story from the past, and some of our students, I know this isn't all of our students, and you may not have been at your best, but basically implied there's people around here who get paid to clean that up. What if justice was like, wait, the people that get paid to clean stuff up here are our brothers and sisters in Christ as well, and I couldn't wait to help them. Let's pick it up ourselves so it's half the mess that it really would have been. What if when you walk across Cougar Walk, instead of just being so scared you're going to get made fun of or looked at weird, that you would be one of the bold ones that lifts up your head and actually give a smile to somebody, or find someone that could actually use a, hey, nice to see you today. This justice can be so important, and it requires a discerning heart how to value others and to give dignity. Do each of us have abilities, leverage, or even power to create change? I realize some of us in here don't feel like we have power. I had a student tell me the other day, and this is no cut on a particular office. It was just an acknowledgement of sometimes you as students feel powerless. They walked in to take care of a bill, to work on something in a particular office, and they couldn't do anything until a parent called in because the loan was with them. And so sometimes it's easy for you as 18 to going, well, I'm still not totally in charge of my life. I don't have any power. I can't make any change. One of my favorite things that God pointed me to in college was when I was working at a restaurant. Never got to be one of those waiters that makes all the money. I was always a busboy running dishes in and out of the kitchen, grabbing stuff. I started to see two different worlds. I saw a crowd that worked really hard that never came out of the dish room. And I saw a crowd that just walked around and smiled and served plates and got huge tips. And I started to think through a little bit for a lot of the rest of my life, what would it be like to sneak into kitchens and dish rooms and tip people the same amount that you would give a waiter that just brings out a hot plate of food? Do you realize how many justice possibilities are all around us? And it just takes eyes to see, or creativity of a God that gives you value so you can give everybody value. Here's what we're going to do this 3-week series. We're hoping none of us will stick our head in the sand. Not say it's our fault, not say it's somebody else's fault, not ignore anything. And the way we want you to think about it is we want you to think about it in the personal. If we can't figure out justice on this campus, we've missed it. We want you to think about it locally, the city of Azusa, the city of LA. If someone's harmed, fouled, needs to be valued, dignity needs to happen, that you'd care about locally. And we want you to do that globally. In some ways, we don't want you to pick one and ignore the others, but to be discerning and open to what God wants to do. And what we're hoping you'll see is that what is in Micah is when God reveals something in us, there is hope. There's hope to become something different. We want us to act, we want us to love, and we want us to walk in such a way that is honoring to God. Here's how we're going to end tonight. The band's coming up, and that sweet little chorus that Kyle and Sierra sang that's based on this Micah 6:8, I'm going to have them sing it over us as you sit there and reflect for a second. And this would be my hope. Could every single one of us be an open book and say, God, where there is injustice in me, I'm ready to see it. And sit quietly as it's sung over you. And as you begin to see that, I double dog dare you to say to God, how do I live differently? How do I act? How do I change that? And what the greatest worship you and I could do tonight is not sing with all of our lungs and power and vocal cords, but to actually walk out of here in the next 24 hours, 48 hours, or next week to live in such a way where we've noticed reality, we've grieved and asked God to do something different, and now there is hope to be someone different.